Welcome to this presentation of the St. Augustine Historical Society. Our mission is to acquire, preserve, and interpret the historical influence of St. Augustine and its sphere of influence for the benefit of the public through its stewardship of historic buildings and collections, research, publications, and educational programming. Please consider donating or becoming a member in order to support us in our mission. Please go to staughs.com and click the support button. Thank you. Fine dining at the Ponce de Leon Hotel. The Ponce de Leon Hotel was unlike any other St. Augustine hotel. Henry Morrison Flagler conceived and built his hotel to appeal to the highest level of Gilded Age society. Today we will discuss how the Ponce de Leon fit into sleepy St. Augustine, and in particular, how the guests of the hotel dined in true Gilded Age style. This is the 1885 Bloomfield map of St. Augustine. After 300 plus years of existence, the city had not grown very much. It was a typical sleepy southern town. From the 1850s onward, tourism to St. Augustine was primarily consumptives, those with tuberculosis, who came because it was thought that the climate was good for their health. The first time Henry Flagler came to St. Augustine, he complained that it was filled with sick people and no one of his social class. Here is a bird's eye view of St. Augustine in 1885 before Henry Flagler remade St. Augustine. This map shows the hotels that existed before Henry built the Ponce de Leon. Here's a view from the west near the current Riberia Street. Cows grazed not very far from the center of town. St. Augustine was typical of many small southern towns, with unpaved streets, wooden hotels, no electrical lights, and very few attractions. Here's another view from La Quinta and Riberia showing the quiet and sandy streets near town. There was very little for visitors to do while they were here. The lighthouse on Anastasia Island was one of the few attractions. Visitors took a boat to Anastasia Island and boarded this horse cart to ride through the marshes until they got to the lighthouse and the alligator pens that were also located there. Here is a close-up from the bird's eye view of the area where Henry was going to build his magnificent hotel. Here you can see that he filled in the tidal Maria Sanchez Creek, which flowed almost to Orange Street. He moved two churches, moved the Sunnyside Hotel, and tore the roller skating rink down. Whenever I see this photograph, I am reminded of someone's kindly grandfather, just sitting, relaxing, and watching the world go by while having a smoke. Well, this is no ordinary old guy. This is Henry Morrison Flagler, waiting on the platform in Key West. Flagler was a self-made man, a Horatio Alger hero. At the age of 13, he walked from his home in upstate New York to the Erie Canal, took a canal boat to Buffalo, got on a sailboat to Cleveland, and then walked another 80 miles to a store run by a member of his family where he had a job waiting. He often slept under the sales counter, wrapped in brown paper to keep warm. He made and lost money in business over the years, and it was not until he joined with John D. Rockefeller that he made his fortune with Standard Oil. The rail cars behind him are his private Pullman cars, a combination of office and apartment that allowed him to manage his business while on the road. They were the 1880s equivalent of a large business jet. I am sure that while sitting there, his mind is already on his next project, or how to improve what he already has. Flagler was the idea and money man. He conceived the idea of building a luxury hotel in St. Augustine and provided the money to bring it to fruition. He was smart enough to know that he did not have the expertise to turn an empty building into a luxury hotel. To do so, he turned to a man who was an experienced hotelier, had the right contacts, and knew the hotel business. He turned to Osborne Dunlop Seavey, then the manager of the San Marco Hotel. Seavey was literally born into the hotel business. He was born in and then lived in hotels run by his father. He opened both the Magnolia Hotel in Magnolia Springs and the San Marco Hotel in St. Augustine. He had experience in how to open up a brand new hotel. Seavey attended to the myriad details of the construction and furnishing of the Ponce de Leon. He was the one who hired staff, bought the plates, towels, bedding, kitchen equipment, and the thousands of other items needed to turn an empty building into a luxury hotel. Flagler had met Seavey when he stayed at the San Marco and conceived the idea of creating a luxury hotel in St. Augustine. Much of the information about what Seavey purchased came from this booklet published in the 1950s from Seavey's own scrapbooks. The current whereabouts of his scrapbooks are unknown. Flagler built the Ponce de Leon for those of his social class, the newly wealthy industrialists and entrepreneurs of the Gilded Age. They were not afraid of spending money lavishly, trying to outdo one another. This photo is of the 1903 dinner on horseback at Sherry's Restaurant in New York City. The incoming president of the Equestrian Club created this dinner for the 36 members of the club. The cost of the dinner was $50,000, or about $1.4 million in today's money. Henry knew that to make his new hotel a success, it had to be grander, better decorated, and more luxurious than his competitors. The competing hotels in St. Augustine were wooden and not very luxurious. The dining rooms were plain with few decorations. The Ponce, on the other hand, was an all concrete building and beautifully decorated. This is the Florida Hotel at the corner of St. George and Treasury. This ad was published after Henry had built the Ponce de Leon Hotel. In his advertisements, he touted St. Augustine as the Newport of the South, the winter equivalent of the summer luxury enclave in Rhode Island. Here's a picture of the Magnolia Hotel on St. George Street. This is the dining room of the Magnolia Hotel, which was plainly decorated, few windows, and gas lights. This is the Sunnyside Hotel. The entire hotel was moved from its original location so Henry could erect the Ponce de Leon Hotel. One portion of this building still exists on West King Street, just east of the Boys and Girls Club building. This is the San Marco Hotel, located approximately where the city parking garage is located today. It was entirely constructed out of hard pine. When Henry stayed at the hotel in 1885, he felt it was a fine hotel filled with people of his social class. It was during this stay that Henry decided to build a luxury hotel in St. Augustine. This is the only known view of the dining room of the San Marco Hotel, which Henry felt was one of the finest in St. Augustine. The room had windows on both sides, so it was lighter than other dining rooms, but was still somewhat plain. Compare this with the dining room of the Ponce de Leon Hotel. The architects created a large, bright, and airy dining room with many windows and two curved alcoves. The two-story ceiling was painted with varying scenes. At the end of the room was a doorway that led towards the kitchen. Overhead was a balcony where musicians would play during the meals. The room was opulent and provided the perfect setting for the fine food that would be served to the patrons. The Ponce was the first building in St. Augustine to have electric lights, so at night the room was softly lit by Edison light bulbs and candles. I was able to have lunch one Saturday in the Ponce de Leon dining room, now the Flagler College dining room, and I was able to take these images. Certainly a more elegant dining room than at most colleges, though the menu is not the same as during the hotel's heyday. Another view showing the balcony where the musicians entertained the diners. One of the two side rooms off the main dining room. Additionally, there were four smaller private dining rooms for intimate parties. An example of the dinner service used in the Ponce dining room. This is in the St. Augustine Historical Society's collection. It is known as the pomegranate pattern. This is an overhead view of the hotel, dining room, and kitchen area. Beyond the kitchen was the building that housed mechanical equipment and artist studios. This drawing also shows the four private dining rooms that are on either side of the dining room. The two you pass as you enter the dining room today still exist, and the one on the left is the president's dining room. As you can see, the dining room is between the luxury of the hotel and the utility of the kitchen. On one side, the guests had beautifully appointed areas for their use. On the other, the hot, smelly kitchen and storage areas where the staff toiled 24/7 during the 4 months the hotel was open. Here's another view of the kitchen building, the large, white-colored building to the right of the chimney. The first floor housed storerooms, refrigerators, a locker room, and dining room for the help. The second floor was 2 stories high and housed the kitchen and all the related functions. We will be taking a closer look at this shortly. The top floor of the building functioned as the dormitory for the white staff. Later, as black waiters came to work, they were housed elsewhere. The black men were in the colored dormitory, still existing as condos or apartments at the corner of St. Francis and Cordova, while the black women were housed in the laundry located near the train station. Seavey and Flagler knew that their guests required the highest quality food exactly as they were used to in northern hotels and their own homes. The food was French style, as the newly rich looked to the Europeans for models of how a wealthy individual lived and ate. French cooking was regarded as the source of high style cooking. Thomas Jefferson went so far as to have one of his slaves trained in the art of French cooking. The meals at this time were multi-course, offering a wide selection of choices. Here, breakfast starts with a choice of oyster stew or clam fritters. Next, a fish course. Then eggs 6 ways or 6 different omelets. Eggs a la Portuguese are eggs that are cooked in a tomato sauce. Shared eggs are baked eggs. The meat course included kidneys, steak, bacon, broiled pig's feet, tripe, etc. A cold meat followed, including pickled pig's feet, corned beef, ham, tongue, and fowl, followed by potatoes 8 ways. Then a grain course with graham rolls, griddle cakes, buckwheat cakes, rice griddle cakes, toast, and muffins, followed by a hot beverage and fresh fruit. Broma was a light cocoa drink. Lunch was another small meal of many courses. You could start out with clams, moved on to your choice of two soups, usually one clear. You then had crudités, a fish course, a hot meat course, vegetables, a cold meat course, your choice of salads, pie, pudding, preserved fruits, and a hot beverage, fruit, cheese, and crackers. Dinner was no mean affair. As most dinners did, it starts with the choice of Blue Point oysters or little neck clams. Blue Point oysters were from a particular place in the Long Island Sound, while little necks are for the size of the clam rather than the location. The next course includes an appetizer of canapes Madison, which is toast with ham, mustard, herbs, Parmesan cheese, which was then toasted. Or you could have tomatoes, olives, almonds, or cucumbers. The next course was a fish course, here boiled sheep's head, followed by fowl or a meat course, including beef à la flambe Belgian, which is beef and onion stew created by cooking onions and meat in a dark Belgian beer until a rich dark sauce is created, or grenadine of lamb à la soubé, which is lamb in a white sauce with an onion puree added. Provencal sauce is a sauce made with various herbs and tomatoes. You would follow this up with a palate cleanser of punch. Here, the game course is English snipe on toast. Dessert includes a queen's pudding, which is a cake made of breadcrumbs, eggs, and cream, covered in meringue and having a sauce. Washington pie is really a cake with a sauce, and Maizena cake is a type of bread pudding. Or you could have more traditional cakes, cookies, and ice cream. All of this was finished by fruit, cheese, and coffee. This is a different dinner menu, and it follows the same pattern, just with different food offerings. Notable among these includes only clams, no oysters, calf's head as an appetizer, Philadelphia squab as the game course, and a Roman punch composed of 2 cups of lemonade, the juice of 2 oranges, 8 ounces of champagne, 8 ounces of rum, 2 large egg whites, a few drops of lemon juice, and 3 cups of confectioner's sugar. This was served almost as a sorbet, or it could also be served as a drink with ice. The people who made the hotel work. When I first started researching this topic, I made the assumption that local residents would be hired to work at the hotel. This was not the case. With the exception of the menial jobs, the workers were all imported from the north. They were already trained in how to serve the wealthy guests and were experienced in running a hotel. They would arrive a week or so before the hotel opened and got everything ready. When the season was over, they rode trains back north. Carl Abbott, in his book Open for the Season, describes the continuous card games on the trains running north. The winners could relax for a few weeks until the northern resorts opened up, while the losers had to scramble to find work to tide them over until their summer jobs started up. This is a kitchen of the same era as the Ponce. As you can see, it is an all male crew. So, who were the men who did the cooking at the Ponce? Unlike today, where we have channels devoted to cooking and celebrity chefs, the cooks at the Ponce were named but not heralded. We do know that the first chef was a Senor Compose with 13 assistants. Mr. John Canet and two assistants were the confectioners, and Mr. John Riepert with two assistants was the pastry cook. Senor Compose was the chef at the Manhattan Beach Hotel, which was located on Coney Island. It was a summer hotel, and he served many of the same clientele who came to the Ponce. This is an ad for the Manhattan Beach Hotel, which was located on Coney Island. It lists all of the various amenities and events that were going on. Just the place to spend the summer. The American plan includes all three meals, while the European plan would just be your accommodations. This picture shows just how large the Manhattan Beach Hotel was. And here we have another view of the Manhattan Beach Hotel. If you examine these two menus, the one on the left from the Manhattan Beach Hotel and the one on the right from the Ponce de Leon, you see they are very similar, following the same sets of courses and types of food. By hiring Senor Composi, CV was bringing in someone who was familiar with cooking the same type of food and of the same quality that his guests were familiar with. CV also hired the waiters from the Manhattan Beach Hotel to ensure that service was familiar and of the same high level. The kitchen was huge, over 10,000 square feet, filled with the highest quality equipment. It was utilitarian. It was hot. The stoves and ovens, probably either coal or wood fired, operated 24/7 for 4 months. The public spaces of the hotel are well documented, with many photos being published. The kitchen only lives on in copies of blueprints that were recently preserved and made available. The next photos, as well as the photo used for the men who cooked, are from contemporary New York City hotels and are representatives of this type of kitchen, but with a different layout. This is the only known photo of the staff of the Ponce de Leon kitchen, while in front of them are the highly decorated items they created for that night's events. Henry Hurd, a local collector, found this photo and graciously allowed me to use it. The doorways and windows match up with the old Ponce kitchen. With the exception of one young man on the right, all of the chefs have luxurious mustaches. The next two images show kitchens that are similar to the Ponce. In this photo, the chefs are ready to serve. The sign on the right says that's where you would get your cauliflower, asparagus, and artichokes. In this picture of the kitchen, you can see all of the waiters standing in front of the cooks, probably finding out what tonight's specials were. The two gentlemen in the donkey jackets in the front are probably cleaners. With the exception of Henry Hurd's photograph, I have not been able to find any contemporary images of the kitchen. The 1980s renovation of Keenan Hall gutted the interior and removed any remnants of what the original kitchen may have looked like. This is a restored blueprint of the second floor kitchen, and from that and some newspaper articles, we can get an idea of what the area looked like. The kitchen occupied the entire second floor of the building, over 10,000 square feet. Now, let's take a look at the various sections. This is the steward's office. He was the person to whom Chef Composi and head waiter Prokaski reported to. He was the person who helped the chef develop the menus, bought the food, made sure that food was not walking out the back door, kept everything on budget, and made sure that when the hotel closed, everything perishable had been used up and was not wasted. He was part accountant, part detective, and part manager. His office in the kitchen allowed him to keep an eye on everything. As the waiters came into the kitchen with dirty dishes, they turned right and left them here for the dishwashers. There the dishes were scraped clean, the scraps saved for swill. The dishes were placed into the dishwasher, silver and glass hand washed, and clean dishes placed into the plate warmer, ready for service. This was a hot, humid, and dirty job, and heaven help anyone who dropped silverware into the trash or broke too many dishes. Here is an image from a Scribner's article about hotels. The men are working by hand. The mechanical dishwasher at the time was a mechanism that submerged dishes into hot, soapy water and mechanically agitated them to clean them. Someone would pull the hot, wet dishes out, place them on drying racks, and then put them into the plate warmers. We now move over to the bake shop. This was a 24/7 operation, with bakers working through the night to produce fresh bread, rolls, and sweet rolls for the next day. During the day, the pastry chef would be baking various cookies, pies, cakes, and other sweet treats. The confectioners would also work in this area, producing sweet treats, jellies, and other high-quality desserts. This is the oven that the bakers would work with. On the left is the proofer, where doughs would rise, and the ovens for baking are on the right. Another image from the Scribner article showing the bakers at work. Baking was done at different times of the day because the various items needed to be baked at different temperatures. Breads needed to be done at higher temperatures for the crisp crust, while cakes and pies needed lower temperatures to cook properly. A difficult task when using coal or wood to heat your ovens. The heat was controlled by the amount of fuel. With more coal or wood, the fire would be hotter. As the fire died down, it would slowly cool. A pastry chef needed to know his fire just as much as he needed to know his recipes. The confectioners created jellies, which could be either sweet or savory in these jelly molds. These molds are relatively simple, while some were in the shapes of famous buildings, such as palaces or monuments. The confectioners would create the gelatin required for the jellies by boiling calves' feet to extract the gelatin. These next two slides show how the jellies would be layered with different flavors. The work was painstaking, since a layer would have to be set before the next layer could be added. The next picture shows just how complex this process could be. The jelly on the left required the mold to be supported at an angle, while the one on the right required a careful hand to fill the various dimples in colored liquids and then wait for it to set and add the next layer. They would make many of these at a time, and diners might request elaborate themed ones to be created for their party or private dinner. A waiter entering the kitchen would find this area directly in front of him at the far end of the kitchen. Here is where the chef and cooks work to create the meals from morning until night. CV ordered most of the kitchen equipment from Morandi and Sons, a noted Boston manufacturer of French ranges and commercial cooking equipment. The stoves and ovens were at the far end of the room in what was one of the hottest areas of the kitchen. The stoves were cast iron, heated by wood or coal, and were tended by a fireman, who kept each stove at the proper temperature for what was to be cooked. There were stoves for cooking beef, poultry, fish, and veal. Each cooktop would have a hot spot for boiling, cooler spot for simmering, and a low temperature spot for keeping things warm, all based on the way the fire was banked. At night, the fires would be banked so that stoves could be brought quickly to life as needed throughout the day. Here is a picture of what a typical Morandi and Son French range would look like. Coal was cheaper than gas, and you used less coal to cook than you would if you were using wood. Gas did not become popular until the 1900s. An example of how a single stove was set up with the hot spots in front and the cooler spots in the rear. This is a steam kettle used for cooking large quantities of soup, stews, stocks, and sauces. It was double walled, as steam or hot water circulated around the space to keep the pot at a consistent temperature. Wine was an important part of these high end meals. Here, wine would be decanted, allowed to breathe, and poured into serving containers. Wines would have been traditional European varieties, primarily clarets, though some white wines and champagnes would also be available. As the waiters came in from the dining room, they would turn left to the serving room. Here they would get bread, rolls, butter, and other pre meal items. After dinner, they would come here for coffee for their tables. Before coming directly into the cooking area, the waiters would head here for their clams and oysters. They would be kept cold here, opened, and plated for presentation, most likely on oyster plates, which were common during the Victorian era. Cold meats would be stored in the cold meat room and prepared for service primarily during breakfast and lunch. On the other side of the wall was the pot washer's room. Most likely other kitchen utensils and pans would also be cleaned here. Another hot, humid, and very dirty job cleaning off crusty, baked on items. Another aspect of the kitchen were the dining rooms. The staff of the hotel were divided along strict, hierarchical lines. Of the staff, Mr. CV was the only person you would see eating in the main dining room. Traditionally, the hotel manager would have a table in the dining room so he could keep an eye on how service was going and interact with guests. The first officers were the managers of the various departments. The second officers were their assistants. The musicians were in a class by themselves, but still valuable enough to be fed in the main kitchen with its better quality food. Today we are accustomed to buying our meat already broken down into its various parts, wrapped, and on a foam plate, ready to be cooked. Here at the hotel, meat would come in as sides of beef, whole pigs, sheep, calves, as well as whole fish. A full-time butcher was required to break down these carcasses into the component parts as required by the chef. The fats would be trimmed off for use in cooking. Bones would be roasted and added to vegetable trimmings to create a stock. Lesser cuts would be saved and used to feed the staff. Also visible here is the silver closet, a lockable room that was used to store the silver serving pieces, silverware, and other valuable items. This is a print of what the first floor of Keaton Hall looked like at this time. Here were the storerooms for all the items used upstairs in the kitchen. Canned vegetables, fresh vegetables, linen, and other items were stored until needed. Also down here was where the lesser staff ate and cleaned up. Ice cream was made and stored here, as well as locker rooms for the staff. While the managers all ate upstairs, everyone else was relegated to the downstairs portion of the building. While the folks upstairs got to eat food similar to what the guests ate, the folks downstairs had a much less fanciful menu. All the trimmings and pieces of meat that the chef did not want to use ended up here in the help's kitchen. This is not to say that the food was bad. It was just less French and more like the food people would eat at home. While the managers might have choices, the staff very likely had one choice. Most likely, the cook was one who was on the inexperienced side rather than highly trained. What is not marked are the segregated dining rooms. Once there was an influx of black help in the hotel, one or more of these dining rooms would have been designated for the black staff. The swill room was where the edible garbage was placed. Farmers up to the 1960s would come to the various hotels to collect the swill to take back to feed to their pigs or other animals. Here are more storage areas in the basement. There were facilities in the basement for the staff to have lockers and to be able to clean up after their day was done. The title says it all. Just let me have the key and a spoon. The golden era of eating that epitomized dining at the Ponce only lasted until the end of the First World War. It was the end of the Gilded Age. By that time, it was no longer a destination hotel for the season. The place to be had migrated to Palm Beach and further south. The two cool winters had doomed St. Augustine to runner-up status. As time changed, so did taste. The huge, multi-course meals of the Victorian era gave way to much less elaborate meals. This menu is the last meal served at the Ponce, more like the menu at a hotel banquet. The Ponce went out with a whimper instead of a bang.